Hello and welcome to the Hub for Show, where you can get ideas to help you grow your eco-conscious business. And today I'm joined by Laura Rana from Khushi Kantha, or Happy Blanket, and we're talking about sustainability as a multi-dimensional concept. So this will become clear when we come to all the questions. But welcome, Laura. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to the chat.
Fantastic. So Laura Rana is the founder of Khushi Kantha, the Happy Blanket, and it's a social enterprise creating sustainable hand-stitched multi-purpose baby blankets, and also opportunities for mothers in Bangladesh to provide for their children with dignity, whilst also contributing to the circular economy. So fantastic social enterprise. So we'll leap straight into the questions. Can you give us a bit of background on what Khushi Kantha is and why it started?
Yeah, so thanks so much I think you've explained it in a nutshell, probably much better than I could. So I was inspired to start Khushi Kantha by the birth of my twin daughters, who are now just about to turn 2. The social enterprise is literally about the same age as them. I kind of got started on it pretty much the first week or so they were born. So they're half Bangladeshi, and when they were born, we were given these beautiful traditional kata blankets, which are traditionally made from repurposed cotton saris. So mothers or grandmothers would turn their old saris into these beautiful multi-layered, ultra soft blankets, and then they apply this lovely embroidery stitch over the top. And yeah, I basically realized, I remember being a little bit overwhelmed to start with, because we were given literally about 40 of these blankets. I thought, even for 2 babies, that's a lot. But I realized how useful they were for pretty much everything on my daily to-do list as a mum. And everywhere I was going, people were coming up to me and asking where they were from. So I've worked in the international development and humanitarian sector for about 14 years, and particularly in Bangladesh. And I'd always had this long-standing dream to do something to support other mothers whose situation I could easily be in myself if circumstances were different. So I kind of put the things together and thought maybe this was my opportunity for how I could do something to support them.
Fantastic. So we're talking about then sustainability as a multidimensional concept. I know you talk about sort of circular economy and helping mothers, and it's a social enterprise and everything. How do you see sustainability as a multidimensional concept?
So I guess from the environmental perspective, it's obviously all about, so we talk about building better futures for the next generation. Our children, the next generation, are the ones who are going to inherit the planet. So thinking about leaving it in the best state possible. And that's where the circular economy comes into it. I think we're going to go on to talk about a little bit more. Then in terms of, I guess, financial and organizational sustainability. So I've worked in the charity sector, as I said, for many years. And I passionately believe, I've worked for all sorts of charities doing brilliant things, but in terms of breaking the intergenerational transmission of poverty, I really think that a social enterprise, like a financially sustainable business model, is the way forward. And then in terms of economic sustainability for the mothers that I'm partnering with. So I think what's really important if you're trying to create opportunities for people that are sustainable, it's about the regularity of income. And then thinking obviously about the women as a part of a broader family and a broader community. Really, if you want to create sustainable change, it's about looking at, kind of across those lenses and then putting it all together. But then obviously there can be some tensions across the different lenses of sustainability. So if you want to be financially sustainability as an organization, maybe you'd make slightly different decisions in terms of kind of the social impact side you want to create. So yeah.
It's tough, isn't it? There's so many different angles to think about, sort of, the social, the people, the economic side of things. Yeah, definitely. And what have you found are some of the trade-offs and pitfalls you've come across in trying to be circular and sustainable?
So I guess a major one for me is, as I was saying, the traditional approach is using these second-hand cotton saris. But I realized pretty early on when I was doing some target customer research, firstly around perceptions of sort of hygiene and safety, and then when I actually started to understand more about safety testing processes, so I got some brilliant pro bono support from a product safety testing lawyer, and realized in terms of actual legal requirements around being able to trace the origin of fabric, and particularly the chemicals in the dyes. And so I've ended up having to rework and regenerate the tradition, basically, so that I can meet those hygiene and safety standards. So rather than using secondhand cotton saris, because basically, in order to make it viable, I would have to test every single sari that I was using. So obviously financially and logistically, like that's not going to be a viable option. So I've ended up, Bangladesh is really famous as the home of the garments industry. So I've ended up partnering with sustainably minded members of that industry. And we're breathing new life into what's known as deadstock cotton fabric. So obviously there's a lot of waste that's generated at every stage of the garment supply chain. So they're passing on some of the fabric to us, and then we're upcycling it as the inside layers of our blankets. So we're sort of retaining the circular principles of the tradition, but regenerating it in a way that is viable from a legal perspective, and in terms of being able to actually make it a sort of a scalable, functional business, basically.
Wow. So lots of things to think about, isn't there? That's fantastic. And what have you found? Have you learned from that? Or is there some tips in that you could share, maybe things that you might do differently if you had the chance to do it again?
I think it's just about keeping really open-minded and keeping true to your values and your principles, and always keeping them at the forefront, but thinking, although you want those to underpin every decision you make, obviously they can play out in different ways, and sort of taking the theoretical approach of what you want to do, and then marrying that with the real world. And very much taking kind of a learning mindset as you go along, and thinking that the original concept you start with is going to change a lot on the journey, and not being too precious about it, and sort of going with the flow, and connecting with incredible communities, like this brilliant one.
Oh, brilliant. I think that sort of being aware that you might have to change. I think some people, when you get sort of a set idea, isn't it, you just want to, you go for that, and you don't want it to change. You don't want anyone to sort of influence that, and it's got to be like that. And I think that, so it's that flexibility, isn't it? Yeah. And so what would you say then is your kind of top eco tip, be it sort of business or lifestyle, or perhaps you might have one of each, I don't know?
I think lifestyle wise, so particularly as a parent of young children, I would say it's about looking at multi-purpose products. So particularly, when you're expecting a baby, you get bombarded with all these endless lists of, what you need in your hospital bag, and all these like hundreds of things that you need. And thinking about products, if you can buy one product that you can use in lots of different ways, obviously, the buy less, buy better thing. Then you can really focus on something of quality. And then even just from a practical perspective, like as we're particularly allowed to start leaving the house again and everything, being able to, in terms of putting stuff in your bag, if you can have one thing that, so our blankets you can use like as a changing mat, for example. You can also use them as a pram blanket, like we use them in as a sunshade, rather than having to have this massive like overflowing bag filled with so many things. Aside from sort of the environmental sustainability angle, there's also a practical purpose to it. So that would be my tip.
And it's lighter, so you don't have to be lumpy. That's amazing. But your blanket, I mean, you just mentioned a couple of things there. It can be used sort of as a blanket, something to sit on, something to cover, something to wrap them in. So it's actually got a lot of it's multi-purpose, isn't it? And I think that comes down to sort of any products, even a cleaning product in the house, you could have one that actually does quite a lot. So, really, that's a really, really good tip. So what would you say, if sort of from a business point of view then, what would your kind of eco tip be there? Do you think there's ways, I know you spoke kind of about financially and stuff like that, is there any sort of tips you've got there?
I guess in terms of what I'm focused on at the moment is looking at, and I guess this is maybe more something I'm looking to learn rather than advice I can offer. So I want to go down the carbon offsetting route, obviously. So I'm trying to map out the carbon production across the whole production process, obviously the shipping, but then also, so the blankets are handmade, and then even the new fabric that we're using for the outside layers, that's hand woven. So obviously in terms of the carbon footprint, it's pretty low, but thinking about the traceability of the whole supply chain, and even sort of the dyes that are being, like eco-friendly dyes, but obviously the actual creation of the dyes, and trying to figure all of that out. I guess any advice people have got around, so my professional background is actually in social impact measurement, but not necessarily in terms of carbon footprint. So it's getting my head around that. So it's probably more of a question or like seeking advice than a tip about sort of how far to go and how to map it all out.
Brilliant. Well, then that's one for the viewers. If you're listening just now or you're watching the replay later, please come with your advice, come with your questions and everything as well. And obviously both Laura and I will jump on and we'll answer any questions we can and come up with some more, hopefully, that people can answer. And so we can find you at, is it Khushi Kantha, which is KHUSHI and KANTHA, KhushiKantha.com. Yeah, is that right?
Yes, and then at Khushi Kantha on Instagram, Facebook, etc.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Laura. It was great. So you packed a lot in there, and such a pleasure to have you on the show and hear all about your product and your social enterprise.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me. It was really lovely to speak.
Oh, fantastic. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in. And if you're watching later, as I say, keep the questions coming. Please share if you know anyone that's interested in this. And we'll see you same time next week. Bye for now.
Bye.